Hello my friends, as I have promised, today we will take a look at the comparison of Panasonic's two 12-60mm lenses, the F2.8-4 Leica and F3.5-5.6 Lumix. I have made a full review of both, so in this video I will mainly focus on the differences and I will try to answer the question whether the Leica is worth the extra money over the Lumix. The zoom range is exactly the same on both, 24 to 120mm full frame equivalent, so these are very versatile lenses. In terms of build quality, the Lumix 12-60 is actually very well made. The rear part seems to be metal, the mount is metal as well, rest of the lens is made of plastics, but it feels solid overall. The Leica 12-60 is completely made of metal except for the inner tube, which is plastic. It feels very solid, and the build quality meets my expectations for premium lens of this type. Both are weather sealed, but the Leica has more comprehensive weather sealing and it is also freeze proof up to -10 degrees Celsius. Leica 12-60 is of course bigger and heavier in comparison with Lumix, but it needs more glass to concentrate light onto the sensor, but for what they offer, both of these lenses are very small. On something like Panasonic G9 or G85, the size and weight difference is not that obvious. On smaller cameras like GX9, GX8 or GX85, the size difference is a bit more obvious. Unfortunately, in terms of handling, the Lumix has some disadvantages in comparison to Leica. The Lumix is not fully collapsed at widest focal length, which I don't like. It is fully collapsed at about 22mm. The focusing ring is very similar on both. Both are focused by wire rings, sensitive to turning distance and turning speed. Both are very smooth and the manual focusing works basically the same on both. But when it comes to zoom ring, it is completely smooth on Leica. Smooth zoom in videos is not a problem with Leica, whereas on the Lumix, the resistance of zoom ring is unfortunately uneven. It is definitely not the smoothest, and even after 1 year of using it didn't get much better. On the Leica you have also switch for autofocus and manual focus and the switch for turning the image stabilization on and off. On Lumix there is neither of those. On G9 or G80 I don't miss those because there is focus modal on the camera, but on less advanced bodies, autofocus and image stabilization switches could be useful. The first thing worth mentioning regarding the optical characteristics is that the Leica is parafocal lens, which means that when you zoom in, the focus point doesn't change, so the subject basically stays in focus while you're zooming, which is ideal for zoom in video. The Lumix is unfortunately not parafocal, so it doesn't keep the focus while zooming in. The widest aperture on Leica at 12mm is 2.8, which is 2/3 of a stop more than f3.5 on the Lumix. That doesn't sound like much, but it is actually a difference between using ISO 1600, which is perfectly fine by me, and ISO 2500, which is where the noise starts to get fairly noticeable on most Micro Four Thirds cameras. So that extra light that Leica can gather can actually make a significant difference. In terms of sharpness, the Leica is clearly sharper, especially towards the corners. But the question is whether you have opportunities to publish your pictures in format where the extra sharpness will be visible. For posting on social media, for example, the Lumix is more than sharp enough. If you like to crop your pictures a lot or you make large prints, then the extra sharpness might be visible, but I think that the average audience will not be able to tell the difference. What has actually become more important to me than the sharpness is the overall character of the lens. And this for me personally is the main reason to buy the Leica instead of Lumix. 24 to 120mm is quite long focal range, and there have to be some compromises made in terms of optical design to achieve this kind of package. And considering those limitations, the Leica actually has a lot of character. Part of that is the contrast, that is really excellent. Another part is the rendition of out of focus background. Leica has 9 aperture blades, Lumix only has 7, and that is actually visible. The background is a lot smoother on the Leica, and the third part is the color reproduction. The Leica just makes the image looks richer and the space appears to be more three-dimensional. It may sound like an ad for OLED TV, but that is just what I think. The Lumix is actually a very nice lens, it is perfectly fine for what it is, but the image simply doesn't look as rich as with Leica. Regarding the distortion, chromatic aberration and vignetting, those are corrected in camera when using Panasonic body, so those are not a problem, although there is some distortion and vignetting still left after the correction, but overall it is not a major concern for me. In terms of autofocus, I haven't found noticeable difference between the Lumix and the Leica. For both stills and video it works about the same. Same is true about the image stabilization. I unfortunately don't have Micro Four Thirds camera without in-body image stabilization, so I can't properly test that. So to sum up, I think that both are very good lenses for intended purposes. The Lumix is a brilliant budget kit lens, it is sharp and optically sufficient for intended purposes. The main reasons to choose the Leica over the Lumix are the advanced optical characteristics like the contrast, smoothness, out-of-focus background, wider aperture, parafocal zooming, and smooth zooming. If you intend to use 12-60mm lens a lot on the G9, G85 or G85S, especially if you have switched from larger sensor camera, then I think that the Leica is a great choice. If you intend to mainly use prime lenses or adapted lenses or long telephoto lenses and you just want 12-60mm to fill in for less frequent occasions, the Lumix is perfectly fine. Or if you want to primarily just capture images without deeper artistic effect, the Lumix will also be a good choice. So that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. I hope that you liked this video and that you found it to be useful. Stay tuned for more videos and maybe consider subscribing if you don't want to miss my future content.